again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Alumni Chats, a weekly podcast featuring alumni from the Department of Broadcasting and Journalism here at Western Illinois University. My name is Buzz Hoon. I'm the host of the podcast. I'm also the interim dean for the College of Fine Arts and Communication. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Libby Allison Derry from the class of 2003, and it doesn't seem possible, Libby, that I have not seen you in almost 20 years.
I know. Preparing for this podcast, it was really fun thinking back over the years since WIU. It's just hard to imagine that it's been almost 20 years. It's crazy to me.
Well, you look terrific. Won't you give everybody a life update? What's going on in your life?
Sure. I live with my family in Germantown Hills, which is right outside of Peoria, Illinois. I'm married to my husband, Rob, have been for 15 years now. And we have two boys. We have a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old who's in 3rd grade this year and doing all of the sports he possibly can. So we're pretty busy all the time.
That's awesome. And we're going to get into your career, about how you kind of traversed. You went around the United States, came back, but we're going to go all the way back to your origins. Okay. Let's start all the way back, because back when I used to teach the media and minorities class, one of my favorite questions was, what kind of things do you think influenced you and had an impact on you growing up? So let's talk about that. Family, environment, school. What was it that you think really impacted you now, looking back?
Definitely my parents. I grew up in Galesburg, Illinois, and both of my parents were teachers. My mom was junior high special ed, and my dad was English at the high school and also taught a film class too, which was really cool.
Nice.
But growing up in that environment, education was always very important. And with my dad, writing was very important. And so, we spent time as a family, we'd watch the news at night. When it came to writing papers, it was something that we'd talk about during dinner. We ate dinner together every night. And I have 2 siblings. And so it was just a great family dynamic that we had. And I'm so fortunate to have that, because it really helped me moving forward, not only in education, but just as a person, coming from that supportive household that I had. I'm extremely grateful for that.
That's awesome. And, a lot of times that kind of support, or especially early on, as you're trying to find out what kind of skills you have, where your life may lie. I'm sure at some time in high school, you're kind of exploring kind of different things. What were you like in high school? What were you doing to find out what your skills may be?
High school, I was really big into social activities, really. Okay. I played a lot of sports, but I was not very good at any of them. So basically it was, to have friends and kind of, I was kind of free spirit fun in high school. That was kind of my main goal. But at the same time, I loved communications. I thought that I kind of had a knack for writing, for just talking to people and being personable. So that was something that I wanted to explore more in college, when I did decide where I wanted to go. So that's what I did. And really just little by little, the vision of what that was going to be changed until, I did end up at Western and in the broadcasting department, and knew that that's really what I wanted to do.
You took this little twist where you went up to the Quad Cities and you went to Augustana College. And and during that period of time, you had, I believe, an internship.
That's
right. Is that right?
It is. So I was at Augie. I loved it there. I was at Augustana and I was a communications major, but I wasn't sure what that meant, what it was going to mean for me. I always had an interest in news, but at the time, Augustana didn't have a journalism, even minor at that time. So it was something that I was interested in, and just on a whim, I was watching the news one night and thought, I'm just going to reach out. And I reached out to one of the anchors of that show, and he got back to me immediately. I had questions like, do you have an internship? What do you love about the job? I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to do. And he offered me a chance to come and meet him, meet the team. And I walked out of there with an internship. It didn't pay anything, and it wasn't for any college credit. So really, it was just kind of a volunteer opportunity when I look back on it, really. But I learned so much. I went in there not knowing any of the lingo. I didn't know what a VOSOT was. My first day, they asked me to go edit a VOSOT for an anchor, and I didn't know what that meant. I had to be like, what is that? When I had other students that were there for actual internships for college credit, who just kind of looked at me like, who is this girl and why is she here? But I had the fortunate experience too of having a lot of people at that station that were really supportive of young people trying to make it and trying to get into the business. And they kind of took me under their wing. And by the end of that summer, I had learned so much and realized that this really was something that I wanted to do and pursue.
That's so nice. Along the way, I'm sure that you have returned that sort of same respect that you were given as a young person, because we all have to get started at some point in time. But early on, just to have an interest in that and have people that are already experienced or in positions to be able to help guide you, I'm sure that that's something that's impacted you along the way.
Absolutely. Especially the markets that I was in. I was in the Quad Cities, I was in Charlottesville, Virginia, and then back here in Peoria. And, those aren't big markets. You're getting a lot of students or kids, young adults, sorry, yeah. Don't mean to be condescending, young adults who come in who have, this is their first job. And so it was a great opportunity for them to learn. It was a great opportunity, as you said, to kind of pay it forward for what, happened with me when I first started. Some of those young journalists were more receptive of it than others, but yeah, it was definitely a way to kind of pay that back.
So how did we get so fortunate to have you come to WIU?
Well, I mean, after I did that internship and realized what I wanted to do, despite how much I loved Augustana, because I really did, lots of friends there, it was a big jump for me to move. This was my senior year. It was after the fall trimester of my senior year. It just, I needed more, I needed more support when it came to the technicalities of being on TV, of journalism, of what I needed to do. And I needed a staff that would help support me and really shape, what I could be. And doing my research, it was obvious that Western was where I needed to be.
So what's your early memories of Salee Hall and how did you get involved?
Where are the windows? Was my first thing. I walked up, I'm like, am I in the right place?
Yeah.
Because I wasn't a typical student, really. A lot of the kids that I was in school with at that point had been there for 2 years or more, and so I was walking in as a transfer, also as a commuting student. So I was in Galesburg, driving to class every day, going to class, and then hustling back to Galesburg because I was waiting tables at the same time too. So my first, I was very nervous, first of all, but everyone was extremely welcoming. I mean, it just clicked. It's, it felt like I had been there for a while after I'd been there for a week. And, you were so welcoming. Don Norton, Roger Sadler, the crew there was just so happy to have more students engaged, more students, interested in broadcasting, in journalism as a craft. And that really, really helped.
Yeah, because you became an anchor and not, let's face it, not many people are have that self-confidence or want that challenge of being the person that's on the air. So what inspired you to do that?
I just loved it. Yeah. I don't know if there was a certain inspiration other than, growing up, watching the news, seeing the people that made news happen and who were just such good storytellers and wanting to do that. And it was, like I said before, I just fell in love with it. It was something that I felt that I was good at, and I enjoyed it.
And of course, our interaction comes from when you were part of the sports crew. Mm-hmm. And, that's right. And I was going to share with you, this is a picture I've kept. I had a bunch of these, and this is you and Brian Carpenter. And this was, we had a bunch of pictures. Mike Irvine was among that, Matt Workema, Keith, mm-hmm. Keith Luck, a bunch of, back and we were just really trying to find our footing in terms of doing lots of different productions, but that was a cold football game, I believe.
It was a cold football game. I loved the football games. I loved it because we had the best seats in the house. I usually was the center field camera. which I really liked. But it was cold. You had to keep, shifting your weight from foot to foot so your feet wouldn't freeze off. But I remember one time you let me sit in the van and actually direct and call shots. And I was so nervous because that was normally not a student-centric position there. And it made me so nervous, but it was so fun. I loved it.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that because I also remember not letting the many students take over the reins of that, because it was, when you have 6 or 8 people on your head talking at the same time, it becomes a little overwhelming if you haven't done it very often. So what other you, as you said, you had this sort of different type of connection with WIU, because you're going back and forth from Galesburg, which I didn't realize that at the time, what a work ethic that you're establishing for yourself. And I totally appreciate all that. But other students and people that you remember from that period of time?
I think that the student that I got closest to was Matt Thiel, honestly. Like he and I made quite the team. We anchored together. I did news and he did sports. We would go before a newscast. We would try to hit up the Mexican restaurant before we made it on air. And I mean, it's just Matt, as passed away. He had cancer, and that was just devastating. I mean, what a great guy, and what a funny guy, full of light and so talented, but Matt, I think, was the one that I was probably the closest to. But there was a small crew of us that would kind of hang out on the front steps of Sally before classes. And as I said to you via email, I would give anything just to be sitting in the sunshine out there again without adult responsibilities yet.
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned Matt, because Matt was somebody that if you ever met him or spent any time with him, he knew how to make you smile. He was always cracking you up. I mean, we used to have his picture up, and he used to on the 3rd floor, Lee Hall, and he thought it was so funny. He was near the bathroom. He would make sure to mention that. Hey, I'm hanging out by the women's bathroom.
Yeah. But he was great. He actually came to Galesburg for a while when I was still there waiting tables. And I mean, his radio career just took off after that. So he was great.
So during your time there, you're getting prepared for your first job, which again takes you back to the Quad Cities.
Yeah, it did. And so because, I had done the internship there, and I had a lot of people who I had made great connections with, as soon as I graduated, they reached out and said, we'd love you to join us. We don't have any reporter positions open right now. Would you take a job as a part-time editor? And so at first I was like, oof, that's not really what I had in mind. But it's one of those things that if you have a chance to get your foot in the door at a place that that you had room to grow, that that there were people there, rooting for you and willing to give you chances, take it. And so that's what I did. And so I started as that part-time editor, and within a few months, a reporter had left for another job. And so I took an MMJ job, and then started anchoring sports on the weekends. And so producing the sportscast in Davenport on the weekends. And we only had a Saturday newscast at that point, or Sunday newscast at that point. So I was sports anchor on the weekend and MMJ / sports, MMJ during the week. And so that was for a while. And then the sports director left. And so I started anchoring sports during the weekday, and then eventually took over the sports director position for a while. And that was a few years that I did that.
That is so awesome. And first of all, brings me great pride that you were doing that. But I'm sure you were also facing some challenges, along the way as a young woman that's trying to make her way. And certainly that as a sports director, even that I'm sure that was, you saw your challenges.
I did. I would run into people and they would ask what I did for a living. And if I told them, well, I'm the sports director at KLJB, they would immediately fire off questions like, what's, name the 5 starting pitchers for the Cubs and Cardinals go. And what are the rotations? I would get quizzed, and I felt like I had to be kind of a walking encyclopedia of sports knowledge to prove myself, that I deserved that position. And none of my male peers at other stations I know had to deal with that, out in the public or anything like that. So that was difficult at times, but it is what it is. And so I would answer that question sometimes. Would you ask so-and-so that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are you asking me this? And usually people would kind of realize that they, maybe stuck their foot in their mouth a little bit.
So all this time, even though you're involved with sports, and I know you were part of our crew, you love sports, but you really had an affinity for news, didn't you?
I did, yeah. And at KLJB, I was in sports, and then the female anchor position opened up. And so I talked, with my then fiance about it a lot, and kind of decided that I was really going to try to go for it. And so then ended up moving over into news, and I just loved it. I felt like I was back home a little bit.
So how many years were you at KLJB?
I was in Davenport for nearly 6 years.
Okay.
And it was kind of an interesting situation. It was Independent News Network was the actual place that I worked, and KLJB was one of our newscasts.
Okay.
It was kind of ahead of their time. We would contract out newscasts for a lot of smaller stations who didn't have the capital or maybe didn't have the desire to staff their own newsroom. And so they just get some local reporters with gear and shoot us, their local content, and we would produce it, anchor it, do the weather, do the sports, just all in Davenport, and then zip it to like Macon, Georgia, or, places like that. So I was doing maybe 8 newscasts a day at one point.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it was a lot, especially when I was doing sports, because I would have to produce every segment for different markets. And so I was producing 8 sports segments a day. So that was another reason I was ready to jump over into news. So,
wow.
it's a lot.
Yeah. So while you're there, you're growing, you're learning, and then you decide to head out to Virginia.
That's right. Yeah. It was a big move, but we kind of looked at it as, we were married, but we didn't have any kids. You can always go home.
Yeah.
I was kind of on the verge of burnout because of, the giant volume of newscasts that we were pushing out every day. But I still wanted to explore, the job that I loved. And so this opportunity in Charlottesville, Virginia came along, and I applied for it, got the job, and it was wonderful. Charlottesville is just gorgeous. UVA is there. It was a top quality newscast. It's small market, but I mean, some of the newscasts that come out of that station are better than some of the larger markets that I've seen. I mean, I was very proud to be a part of that.
Wow. What kind of things were you working on while you're there? What kind of things do you have fond memories of?
There were a lot of different things. Charlottesville was, because it's kind of a purple state in certain ways. There were a lot of political rallies. Obama came downtown Charlottesville right next to our station when he was putting on rallies for Hillary. And so we had a lot of political rallies. The gubernatorial races were always really close and really contentious. Those were always fun. There were some not so great headlines. There were a couple murders that happened in Charlottesville that made national headlines. It was a lot. But at the same time, I felt more in tune with it, because in Davenport, like I said, we were just churning out newscasts for places all over the Southeast. But I could focus on one community, and it was great to be able to tell their stories.
What I think is interesting as we sort of hint towards what happens to your future is you're also learning to be a representative of the station for the community, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. Anything you do, I think, kind of can fall back into brand management. I mean, you are a representative of anything, where you work, you want to, emit something that your work would be proud of. Even your family, you're a representative of your family as well. So whatever you do, you have to kind of think that brand management is part of it.
So while you're there, you had you decide at some point in time that you need to be back towards Illinois again, which I think is
Yeah.
for some people, especially during this winter week of
Oh my
snow
God.
and ice and everything, is thinking, Libby, what were you guys thinking?
I know. Well, it's because we had our first son, and we do. At that point, it was Skype calls with friends and family back home, and just seeing my nieces and nephews and my parents, and knowing that I'd see them once or twice a year, just was not enough for us. And so we made the gut-wrenching decision because we had wonderful friends there. Charlottesville is just such a cool place. I mean, it's in the foothills of the mountains. It's close to DC, 3 hours from the ocean. It's a college town. It was great, but it just wasn't home, And so we packed up, took our son and our dog, and headed back to Peoria.
And so you head into Peoria and you start working at a TV station there. And so same type of responsibilities and anchoring and working in news. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was at WEEK, the NBC affiliate here in Peoria, for just under 2 years. So it was the same thing. I would anchor the 5, 6, and 10 o'clock news, help with reporting between the 6 and 10 when necessary, not all the time. The anchors there didn't at that time do as much reporting as in other stations that I'd been at, but it was great. It was a good group of people. I sat alongside a long time WEEK anchor, Tom McIntyre, for for my first almost year there. So it was fun to talk to him and learn about kind of the good old days of broadcast news as well, but a lot of young reporters coming in and out at the same time.
Well, it's good that you had that. I want people, especially our students, to understand you enjoy the process of news. You enjoy the people that you're working at, thankfully, because not everybody has that type of experience all the time. But even then, at some point, you're kind of feeling that you might be missing out on some family things, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing is, when you commit to a news job, especially if you're doing the evening shows, you're showing up to work about 1 o'clock for the afternoon meetings. You have, a hot wash after the show's over. So you're not getting home until 11 o'clock at night sometimes. And I knew as my son was getting older and he was just a few years away or a couple years away from starting kindergarten, it was kind of like, well, I realized I'm going to be waking up in the morning and putting him on the school bus just to wake up in the morning and put him on the school bus again. And I know that there are people who are able to work around that a little bit and, not sacrifice quite as much, but it just wasn't, it wasn't what I wanted to do. News had been wonderful to me, but I wanted to start looking for something that I could use my skills, but then also, have more of a family-centric schedule.
So you move into the realm of public relations. And
yes.
I like that you said you weren't sure how you were going to respond, that you may have felt like what did I do? And yet you end up liking it and really enjoying what you're doing. Tell us about your current job.
Well, first of all, I took out the person who is my supervisor now. At that time had another media relations coordinator, which is my title. And she took me out to lunch and we talked it over because she was a former TV person too. She said, in about 3 months, if you take this job, there's a chance that you'll be rocking in a corner thinking, what did I do? Why did I leave? But, talk to me and we'll talk through it and you'll be fine. But I never really had that moment. I fell into it and I really, really like it. I work for OSF HealthCare, and so I'm a media relations coordinator. OSF HealthCare is based in Peoria, but we have 15 hospitals. We have 14 throughout the state of Illinois and 1 in Michigan. And my region right now, I have 2 regions right now. I'm in charge of media relations for the hospitals in Peoria, our flagship hospital, also in Bloomington, Pontiac, Urbana, and Danville. And so I have quite a few hospitals right now. But it's great, and it's kind of the way news was in the fact that you can't really plan your day out half the time. You think your day is going to look one way, then something happens in one of your regions and you're running to Danville or creating messaging for someone, or, media is constantly calling, wanting to talk to someone. Like, for example, with the snowfall, can we talk to somebody in PT about straining your back when you're shoveling snow. Easy ones like that to complicated sweep stories where they need to talk to a lot of our neurologists about something specific. It's just you pick out those subject matter experts from our side and connect them with media. We also do proactive work. We run our own newsroom. And so my team, my media relations team that I'm a part of, there are 5 of us. We have an editorial meeting every Monday about what stories we're going to create as well, because we'll shoot, edit, and post stories that media can then take pieces of and air themselves. Like we'll record in 4K HD, so it's airable. And we create scripts. I can use my reporting skills to create something and hold the narrative as a brand and say, hey, did you guys want to talk about colon cancer? It's March, it's colon cancer awareness. Here is a story already prepackaged for you. Go ahead and take it. And it's worked out well for us. It's worked out really well for the news stations who maybe don't have the bandwidth to send out reporters all the time. It's been a great shift. It's been exciting to be a part of.
And it really matches so well with what you were doing, because you as a reporter and an anchor understand how sometimes you may need some material for the newscast. Yeah. And you, as you said, you just don't have the people power sometimes to go out and get that. So you understand that what you're doing here is a service as well for people, because that's what you're doing. You're just supplying the information to people within that region about particular issues. And one of those things, like, I don't know if you've ever had to do any press releases about COVID. Has that been any, just a couple?
Oh my gosh, COVID really just knocked us all for a loop in the fact that, suddenly we're going from a normal day on March 12th, 2020, and then March 13th, 2020, we were getting easily, 20 to 30 media requests a day. And we were basically living in a war room, working 7 days a week from 7 to 7 at least, just answering these media requests over and over and over again, and having to tap the same subject matter experts over and over again when they weren't even sure what was happening, because this was a completely new thing. We, could no longer let media come into our hospitals, and we still don't, to this day, because, you're worried about spread, especially in the hospitals.
Yeah.
So one good thing that came out of it was the Zoom interview. You see more and more TV stations, using Zoom as a medium to get these interviews. It has made our lives so much better because we don't have to worry about getting a doctor to go outside of a hospital to talk to a media outlet. And now they're more willing to do it because when they have 15 minutes between patient rounding, they can just hop on their computer, do this interview, and then call it a day. So it's actually been really helpful for us. That's one of the benefits, I think, that came out of COVID, at least in my line of work.
Yeah, that makes sense. And of the benefits, like, for instance, what we're doing right now is that, you find ability to shift and an ability to change. Any other things that you've learned as a PR, as somebody working in media relations like this, for that you didn't understand when you were working on the news side?
I think I have a better appreciation of what it takes to speak for a giant corporation, like the levels of approvals that need to happen before anything goes public. Also, how long it takes sometimes to get those approvals, because coming from a newsroom, as like it's very, you have the story, you get it done, you get it on air, everything was fast. And I had to have my supervisor now talk to me, and she was like, you need to understand that we're moving in OSF time, which means, you have to do everything. You have to get everything completely vetted by multiple levels of people. And, that was probably my biggest, oh, okay. Because you're just so used to moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour to learn to slow down and take your time a little bit.
Do you have anybody, and I'm just curious here, that comes to you and says, Libby, can you just write me something to, put something in my, for me to say within the press release? Does that ever happen? Does that kind of stuff happen?
when we do news releases, we often will quote our leadership. And you just have to kind of know your leadership. I have some that like to write their own quotes. I have others that would like, me to write it, and then they can look at it and make their edits or whatever they need to do. Sometimes if we submit a letter to the editor, that is something that, I will take the first stab at and write, and then give it to the leader or whomever we're going to like have sign the letter, and they make their edits then. And so you're kind of building a framework for them. But yeah, I mean, writing is a huge part of it. And having the background from Western of broadcast writing, I learned so much when it came to broadcast writing at Western. I had no idea that how different it was from like print journalism and, just the nuances of that. So I still use that also, because we'll make a print script and a broadcast script and all of these different scripts for one story on our newsroom. So I definitely pull from that.
So when you watch a newscast, whether it's a local or a national one, do you watch it like the average person, or I'm sure you don't?
No, I am so annoying to watch a newscast with, especially like if I go to like visit a friend or my parents even, and I'm watching a newscast from, I'm so annoying. I'll nitpick or kind of just mutter under my breath or be like, you know what just happened there? This is what happened right there.
Mm-hmm.
And no one else cares. But
I watch a sports production the same way. I ruin it for everybody because I think about where the cameras could be and how you would direct it and all those kind of things. So I definitely understand not being able to watch because you've seen how it should operate. So your mind in a way never, once you learn that, it's one of those things that you just can't get out of your mind, I think.
I agree.
But now that you have an understanding of what the PR side, the media relations side does, I'm sure you see the benefits that can. I'm wondering more and more, especially larger businesses, understand the importance of being in charge of their brand, in charge of their communication, and helping to put that out to the public, and how important that your role is for almost any business.
Yeah, I mean, it is important to what you put out in the public. Like I said, everyone who works for OSF, especially the language that we're proactively putting out there as well. I mean, you are representing OSF as a whole. And so being careful with language, being careful with how you represent yourself, how your writing represents the brand is imperative.
Absolutely. What kind of advice do you have for a young person that's interested in communication like yourself, but not sure of how to find the correct path?
Yeah, because I mean, communication, it's such a big umbrella. There are so many opportunities. My advice is make some phone calls, honestly, like just reach out. If there is a position that you think you might be interested in, like what I wanted to do was maybe check out news. If I wouldn't have sent an email, reached out to that news anchor and have him respond to me, I don't know what I'd be doing right now. That was really life-changing for me because it gave me the opportunity to get my feet wet and kind of explore a position that it turned out is what I wanted to do. But I mean, don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions. Normally, you will run into people who are extremely willing to kind of go over their day-to-day. If anything, explain, what their day looks like, why they made the choices that they made, and what they like or don't like about their current position.
That's some good advice there, because, I think that your path is one that I hope that other students that are in the program understand that there's going to be twists and turns as you move along a career path. And I'm just so happy that you're happy and successful, and your family is just growing. I'm very, at some point in time, hope to see you face to face again in Macomb.
Agree.
Yeah. So don't let it be another 20 years before we get a chance to talk, Libby.
Oh my gosh, 20 years. Oh, it'll happen in a flash, won't it?
It will. But the best to you and your family.
Thank you, Buzz.
And thanks to all of our viewers out there. If you are interested in being a guest on the podcast or want to recommend someone, just send me an email. We hope to hear from our alums, and we hope that you continue to watch and listen to the podcast, and really appreciate everyone's support. So until next week, stay safe, take care, and God bless.